in theory, this ECU should be completely dead with the exception of turning it on, and the Maxx is in control of everything else, including the fuel pump. So we had some settings here. We actually got it to start, so go ahead and fire it up. So we don't have any drive-by-wire control because the ECU is still handling that. So we have the Scion TC. The TC's been here for about a year now. We originally tried to run a fuel tech harness, as you guys may or may not remember, but we actually had a lot of issues with the factory harness. Now, the one thing is that it's not so much the ECU that we picked originally. It was more along the lines of a lot of other things. So this is a boom slang harness, which you guys know we use a lot and we love. But the factory harness was failed, and it was a Fuel Tech 550, so it's not going to pan out. So what we have now is we have the Maxx ECU race is what we've got. And so for testing, we're going to just feed some wires through, and we're going to take over on the cam and crank sensors. That's what we're doing. That's number one. Once we take that over and we can get it to crank and it sees the signal, then I'll start wiring in injectors and whatnot to get it going. So what we've got, because we're going to eventually remove the harness here, we've got Andrew taking the TC apart. That way we can just kind of pop the factory harness out, which is down over there in this corner over here. So once this comes out, we'll have a little bit more room, and then hopefully we should be able to just kind of pop the factory grommet out, and then from there we can start running wires. So this is the harness here for the Maxx ECU race, and the only thing that's being ran right now is going to be the crank, home sensor, and the engine ground. Oh, and wideband as well. So these 4 things are going to be ran through the engine bay here, and I'm thinking that I can do takeover on everything else inside the cabin, just temporarily for testing. So like my plan is just to run the 4 injectors, the 4 coils, the home, crank, ground, and then power wire, and then that way we can at least get the car to start and run. Once we get to that point, the next part would be taking over on the drive-by-wire stuff, which is obviously going to be the gas pedal and the pedal position sensor, or the gas pedal rather, inside the cabin. And then finally at that point we start taking over on the auto trans. So the auto trans is going to be something that I haven't done before, so that is going to be a first for me, and hopefully it pans out and I don't cry about it. So over the weekend I was kind of just mentally figuring out how to get this all situated on the Scion TC here. So the thing about the Scion TC is that it needs a new engine harness, right? So I've ran the Maxx ECU trigger and home sensors all the way out there. Now here's the problem. The problem that we have is that I want to test this before really moving forward like we always do. So I just was like trying to figure out what's the smartest way of going about it. So my initial plan was, because this harness is junk, was basically I was just going to cut these wires right here, and these wires right here are for like the coils, and then I was just going to feed the Maxx ECU into here. But that doesn't really make a lot of sense because this harness is already bad, right? So what I'm going to do, I think, is I'm just going to hook up, as usual, the bare minimum stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the wires from the Maxx ECU harness here through the firewall, and then we're just going to tap the factory wires directly to the coils themselves. So I'm going to run the wires in, we're going to split this loom all together, right? And then we're just going to run new wire. And then what we're going to do after that is same deal here. I'm going to unplug all the stuff that's here, which looks like the VVT and the injectors, and same deal. I'm just going to pull those wires up, strip them down, and then tap the signal wires directly into the injectors. Now we're going to do that, and then we're going to leave the factory ECU in control of the main relay for now, that way that it provides power. So here's our plan. Our plan is we're going to run the wires for the cam and crank wires here. We're going to run that directly into their respective connectors. We've already got the ground done, and then we'll do the injectors and the coils. We're going to leave drive-by-wire alone. We're going to leave everything else alone. We're just going to get those things done. So here are the 8 wires. These are, you know, for each coil and each injector. I went to go and plug the coils, and the connectors are all falling apart. So like there's a white insert that's on the inside of them, and it completely fell apart. So I'm not going to dick around with that. I'm just going to basically figure out where all the wires join up, and then we'll just give it a cut, which is probably going to be, by the way things are looking, probably going to be somewhere in this area here, but like I said, we still got a little bit of ways from that. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting off all the wires here, or the sheathing off the wiring here, and we'll get started on wiring and injectors. All right, it's starting to get real messy, as you guys can see, but we've got the cam, crank, injectors, and the coils wired up already. So the next part is that because we've taken over the cam and crank, the problem that we're going to run into is the sheer fact that the factory ECU is no longer going to see RPM. So there's a good chance that the fuel pump won't come on after that, and then the main relay for the power for the ignition coil may or may not work. So we're going to go ahead and hijack that. Fortunately enough, we're going to do that on the inside here. What I'm going to do is just look at the pinout to find out what wires are the main relay and fuel pump wiring in here, and then we're just gonna basically hijack that, and the Maxx ECU will at that point turn it on. So I've got to do some diagram reading to get that all situated here, and then we should be after that, we should, once the battery is good, we should actually be ready to try to crank it anyways to get the RPM signal and test our injectors and coils and all that. So the ECU is plugged in because we need to figure out the EFI main relay. I wasn't getting power on this pin right here, so the ECU is plugged in, but it has no control over injectors, coils, and it doesn't have the cam or crank sensor hooked up to this ECU anymore. So in theory, this ECU should be completely dead with the exception of turning it on, and the Maxx is in control of everything else, including the fuel pump. So we had some settings here. We actually got it to start, so go ahead and fire it up. So we don't have any drive-by-wire control because the ECU is still handling that. And as you can see, we don't have coolant temp or any of that other stuff, but we do have it obviously together. So you can give it a couple revs. All right, hold on. Let me make some changes to the fuel. I think it's F5 here. Let's see where we're at here. Give it just a quick stab. All right. So we don't have the map sensor hooked up at all, so I don't really know. Let's just arbitrary number. Go ahead, give it a shot. A little better. Okay, so we got it running. So it runs on the Maxx ECU. So I guess now at this point we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and finalize the circuitry over here. Do we have RPM over there? Is the TAC working or anything? No. Okay. All right. So TAC definitely doesn't work, obviously. But all right, cool. So we've made a little bit more headway. The factory ECU is completely disconnected. We disconnected CAN bus from the Maxx, and it's really strange because tachometer is not ran off of CAN bus. Neither is AC control. We were able to get the AC to work without even messing with any of that. The only thing that we're going to have a problem with is that there's the fuel pump relay and a couple other relays are like piggybacked off one another. So one relay has to click over before the rest of them will. But with my power probe, if I apply power here, make sure I got a good connection here, and I can turn it over. And I don't know if you guys can see it from here, but the tachometer is working. And that's, like I said, there's no CAN bus control at all, so I'm not sure what it's for. So we're back on this TC today. What I've done temporarily was this wire here activates a relay, and I just kind of jumped it to key on power for now, just so we can get it started. So you see, car starts up. So that's without the stock ECU in play at all. So that's out of the way. We tried to hook up CAN bus to it last time and we couldn't get that working. But what we're going to do today is we are going to start hijacking the throttle itself. So I'm going to run some wiring here. I've got to go over our diagrams, but we're going to hijack the drive-by-wire from the factory stuff here, and then we should be able to kind of get something going. I do need to sit down and try to untangle some of these wires, just because that it's starting to get a bit what's the word I'm looking for, tangled. So we're gonna go ahead and try to clean this all up really quick here, just to straighten it all out so it's just not all over the place. And then from there we're going to like I said, hijack the throttle. Alrighty, so I got the car wired up for drive-by-wire and the accelerator pedal. Now I've only got one accelerator pedal wired up. You're supposed to have two just as a safety, but you can have one just enough for testing. Now, the thing that I do want to mention is that there's a lot that goes into drive-by-wire tuning. It's not just as simple as like setting a target. There's a lot of PID stuff that needs to be done, and that this throttle is not natively supported. So they don't have this throttle body set up. So I have it on very basic settings that are working right now. There is a vacuum line that is disconnected from the fuel pressure regulator. We disconnected 2 vacuum lines to get the car to idle without throttle control. So I've got one of them plugged back in, which is the PCV valve. The other one for the fuel pressure regulator, I can't find out where it's at, but I had the car running, so I wasn't able to actually set it up, or I wasn't actually able to plug it up. But let me fire it up for you guys. So tach was working, but the wire got disconnected. Not a big deal at this moment. So you can see that the target is going all over the place here, but I'm just gonna give it a couple revs. So as you can see, I can rev it up with my foot and it revs up totally fine. So what we gotta do, like I said, is find that vacuum leak tomorrow. We got to get that vacuum leak figured out tomorrow, but like I said, so we got drive-by-wire working, and I've been kind of lamenting over the idea of like how we need to wire in the shifter position. So my concern was that there's so many positions here. So we've got park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3, 2, and L, right? And I was thinking to myself, how do we wire all these into the ECU? But in fact, we really don't. We only really need to wire in the forward position gears. So that's what I'm going to try to do now.